He was one of the richest men in Rome. A senator, a playwright, a philosophical celebrity. People paid to hear him speak. Emperors sought his counsel. He had everything a Roman could want. Then, in a single day, the emperor stripped it all away and banished him to a desolate island at the edge of the known world. What Seneca did next, in the lowest moment of his life, is the greatest test of Stoic philosophy ever recorded. And he passed. To understand how far Seneca fell, you need to understand how high he was standing. By the year 41 AD, Seneca was one of the most prominent men in the Roman Empire. He was a senator, a celebrated writer, a lawyer whose speeches drew crowds. He had amassed enormous wealth, owned multiple estates, and moved in the innermost circles of Roman power. By any measure, ancient or modern, he had made it. Then Emperor Claudius accused him of adultery with the emperor's niece, Julia Livilla. Whether the charge was true is still debated by historians. Many believe it was a political maneuver, a convenient excuse to remove a man who had too much influence. But it didn't matter whether it was true. It only mattered that the emperor believed it. The sentence was exile, not prison, not execution, something that in some ways was worse. Seneca was stripped of his wealth, his status, and his identity. He was put on a ship and sent to Corsica, a rocky, sparsely populated island in the Mediterranean that Romans considered the end of the earth. In a single day, everything he had spent decades building was gone. The reputation, the influence, the comfort, the life he knew, all of it, erased by one man's decree. Corsica in the 1st century was not what it is today. There were no charming coastal villages, no tourism. It was isolated, harsh, and primitive. For a man accustomed to marble floors and stimulating company, it must have felt like being buried alive. Seneca was alone, cut off from his family, his friends, his intellectual community. The psychological devastation of exile wasn't just losing his possessions. It was losing his place in the world. In Roman culture, exile was a kind of social death. You still breathed, but you no longer existed in any way that mattered. No one would seek your advice. No one would attend your lectures. No one would care what you thought. For a philosopher who had spent years teaching others how to handle adversity, this was the ultimate test. It's easy to talk about resilience when you're wealthy and respected. It's something else entirely to practice it when you're sitting on a rock at the edge of civilization, wondering if you'll ever go home. And this is where Seneca's story becomes extraordinary, because instead of collapsing, he picked up a pen. From exile, Seneca wrote one of the most remarkable documents in the history of philosophy. It's called the Consolation to Helvia, a long letter addressed to his mother. Now think about this for a moment. Seneca is the one in exile. He is the one who lost everything. And yet the letter isn't asking for comfort. It's offering it. He wrote to his mother to tell her not to grieve for him, to assure her that he was all right. That philosophy, if it means anything at all, means something precisely in moments like this. He told her that exile had taken his external world, but it hadn't touched his internal one. He could still think. He could still study. He could still contemplate the stars and the nature of the universe. The things that made him who he was, his curiosity, his discipline, his capacity for wonder, those had traveled with him to Corsica. No emperor could confiscate them. He wrote that a wise person carries their wealth inside. Property can be seized. Status can be revoked. But wisdom, character, and the ability to find meaning in any circumstance, these are portable. They go wherever you go. And no exile, no loss, no reversal of fortune can strip them away. This wasn't a man performing philosophy for an audience. This was a man using philosophy to survive. And the fact that he could comfort his mother from the lowest point of his life tells you everything about whether Stoicism actually works when it matters. Here's why this story matters beyond biography. Seneca is the most criticized of the major Stoics. His enemies, both ancient and modern, call him a hypocrite. He preached simple living while owning enormous wealth. He wrote about virtue while serving emperors capable of terrible cruelty, and some of that criticism is fair. Seneca's life was full of contradictions, but the exile to Corsica is the moment where the criticism falls apart. Because this is where Seneca put his philosophy on trial. Everything he had ever taught, every principle he had ever published, was now being tested against the worst experience of his life. And he didn't flinch. He wrote. He studied. He maintained his intellectual discipline. He practiced the same evening review he had always recommended, examining his days with honesty even when those days offered nothing but isolation and uncertainty. He applied the same techniques he would later describe in his letters to Lucilius: negative visualization, gratitude for what remains, the separation of event from judgment. Was he perfect? No. Other writings from exile, particularly a petition to the emperor's freedman Polybius, suggest he also begged for clemency. He was human. He wanted to go home. But the Consolation to Helvia shows a man who, even while hoping for rescue, refused to let his circumstances destroy his character. That's not hypocrisy. That's the messy, imperfect, deeply human reality of trying to live a philosophical life when the world is actively working against you. And it's far more inspiring than a saint who never struggled. In 49 AD, after 8 years on Corsica, Seneca was recalled to Rome. The new empress, Agrippina, wanted him as tutor to her young son, the future Emperor Nero. Seneca came back a different man, not broken, deepened. The 8 years of exile had burned away whatever was superficial in his philosophy and left behind something harder, more honest, more tested. The writings he produced after his return, including On the Shortness of Life and the letters to Lucilius, are considered his greatest works. They carry a weight and urgency that his earlier writing doesn't have, because now he wasn't speculating about suffering. He was speaking from inside it. The exile taught him that you don't know what your philosophy is worth until you need it. Ideas are cheap in comfort. They become priceless in crisis. And the man who returned from Corsica had paid the full price for his. Here's your challenge. Think of the worst thing that has ever happened to you. Not a minor inconvenience. The real thing. The loss that changed you. The failure that still stings. The moment that divided your life into before and after. Now write down 3 things that experience gave you that nothing else could have. Maybe it taught you who your real friends were. Maybe it forced you to develop a strength you didn't know you had. Maybe it redirected your life towards something better. Seneca would call this finding the profit in the loss, not pretending the loss didn't hurt, but refusing to let it be only destruction. Somewhere inside the worst thing that happened to you is a gift you haven't fully unwrapped yet. Seneca lost everything in a single day. And from that loss, he produced the most honest, most tested, most human philosophical writing the ancient world has ever seen. The exile didn't destroy him. It forged him. It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult. If this changed how you think about resilience, subscribe for more ancient wisdom that still works today. Drop a comment telling me what loss taught you something nothing else could. I read every single one.